Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
And the millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby, tell them.
Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Justin Fox, Essa, Abdool, Karim. Essa, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
Pleasure's all mine, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So I'll do a quick little intro. So you are a principal lawyer at Regalia Law. You are the founder of the law firm. You help, obviously, you've helped develop several startups, and you have a special acumen to building businesses and fostering healthy, sustainable growth. I won't get into all the sort of details on the background, but you've got obviously an appreciation for a number of different areas of law. I know at one point you worked in sort of with Olympic athletes and in that sort of sporting realm as well. I know we've sort of discussed a little bit between our conversations around sort of crypto and different aspects around technology and startups and everything. So welcome to the show. You're sort of our first guest in a while. So thank you for jumping on. Appreciate you joining me. Did I miss anything? Is that a tell me what I missed?
No, I think that was good. It was very good. Thanks again for having me. Just as a little bit about myself, finished my legal degree at U Ottawa.
Okay.
After that, I articled at a sports and entertainment law firm, as you had mentioned. Was there for about a year. Had a lot of fun representing athletes, entertainers, and everyone in between. Sort of in that space. Went to the beautiful world of finance and did that I worked at the global international broker or international broker dealer, I should say, in the compliance field. So that was fun. Got to get the front end experience of there, and then decided to leave and start my own firm, and that's where I am now.
Cool. So one of the things you said that, and this was kind of the sports thing based on our conversation before, you said you almost went to The Hague in some sort of dealings that you had, correct? Was that, you want to get into that story and sort of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was fascinating. We were actually working on an appeal for an Olympic athlete. I think her position at the time, she was an athlete, so I guess I should start at the beginning. There's generally a requirement for athletes to fill something called a whereabouts form. It's part of
whereabouts? Like
whereabouts.
where they are, kind of whereabouts.
Where they are.
Okay, yeah.
It's for drug testing purposes.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah,
they can't be wandering the back alleys of these little cities during the Olympics, right?
No, I mean they have to have they really have to plan out a lot in terms of what they do and where they're going, and they need to let the testers know, WADA, or whoever's administrating in their local jurisdiction, where they're going to be. So if you say you're going to be at the gym at 8 a.m. in the morning, you better be at the gym at 8 a.m. in the morning. They don't find you, that's a strike. Okay. Wow. Yeah.
This is only during the Olympics or like all the time?
All the time. So long as you're in the pool, so long as you're in the testing pool. So if you're training, you're more or less in the testing.
So is there like a certain time frame pre-Olympics, like maybe like 6 months from when you qualify to sort of the Olympics, or like how is that pool determined, or is it very?
If you're in the pool, you have to give your whereabouts.
Really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and it's just ongoing. Like the sacrifices athletes have to make in order to be who they are is remarkable.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah. And this is not just Olympic athletes. It's athletes within organizations as well.
Right.
Within larger sporting organizations. That being said, that was effectively the crux of what we were dealing with on that case. It basically, you get your strike. If you're not at your place during your whereabouts, 3 strikes, you're out. Wow. You end up receiving a suspension. And unfortunately, this particular individual, this particular athlete, had to go to a funeral at one instance, and there were some personal matters on another instance, and the strikes were sort of mounting. And unfortunately, they didn't
document maybe, or like even ask. Like,
you have to alert the testers. You have to alert the organizations to let them know that, hey, listen, I'm not going to be here. I'm changing it. And when things happen sort of spur at the moment, that's why they have the strike system in place. Right. In the governance perspective. but yeah, unfortunately, the athlete didn't make those reporting requirements. But I can't remember exactly what we argued, but we did argue that the purpose of the legislation was not to create an undue burden on the athlete,
Right.
and that they should be flexible. And also, we were able to obtain some supporting documents from the coach as well, indicating that there was sort of some difficulties psychologically and in their performance as a result of that person's death, and it was material to their actual performance. So given all of these things that, from an equitable standpoint, in terms of in the name of fairness, as we love to say in the legal world,
Right.
that they should allow this sort of exception to go through. Had it not gone through, I think, and we were fortunate, we did win that at the first instance.
Really? So was
yeah.
she at 3 strikes already, or was she like?
I think she was at 2, but once you get
okay.
that third strike, things get
That's-
complicated very
right,
quickly.
right. So she was trying to like maybe retract one of them to kind of get back to 0 kind of thing, or at least
Yeah,
one.
yeah, exactly.
Right,
Exactly. And yeah, should that get appealed, eventually it does end up at the Court of Arbitration for Sports,
Right.
which is basically like the Supreme Court of sports in the athletic world.
Right.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a fun case.
Yeah. So you won though. So I guess check off one for Essa. There you go. Awesome.
Always winning, Justin. Always winning.
Always winning. There you go. Winning as what's his name? Charlie Sheen. But Charlie Sheen. Yeah, winning. Cool. Awesome. That's good. So hopefully you've continued the winning success throughout your career. So you then went into, you said, into
Securities.
And I was going to say venture capital and stuff, but yeah, so international securities, and then you started your own firm. So what this is, I guess, a question more on the entrepreneurial side, because not every lawyer starts their own law firm, right? I would say very few, maybe. I don't know what the percentage.
Certainly not so early on in their careers.
Right. So I would say, and this maybe is more appropriate to right in line with what we've talked about with a lot of people on this show, is what inspired you, or what was kind of the driving force for you to, seemingly go from what you obviously enjoyed. I mean, one was articling or sort of into, and then into the securities sort of realm of things, and then to jump out and sort of do things on your own. What was that like? What was the inspiration for that?
Yeah, that was a little bit of a fascinating one. So yes, I did jump into the world of finance just because, there's almost this allure to the world of finance, right? You got money, millions, billions, trillions of dollars just kind of flowing through. Like, I want to be part of that sort of thing, right? So yeah, I was fortunate to get the position at the company I was at. Fantastic company, super cool people. What sort of clicked for me, I think I was speaking to some of my mentors, and we sort of had a discussion around me being a lawyer and being in the position that I was at, and whether that's something I should do over the long run. And given where I was in my career, from a legal standpoint, you sort of have this option, right? I could stay at the company 5 years. I could be a lifer, easy, right?
Right.
Or you can take that sort of chance and go into to the actual practice of law, which is very, very different. And some of my mentors, and one of my mentors actually told me, said, listen, Essa, you have a choice. It's fine, you want to stay at the company or not, but if you might regret it later on, because this is the opportunity you would have to sort of go into private practice. It was funny. So don't go in-house, don't go, in an advisory role somewhere, go private practice, get sort of the nitty gritty of the law, because that's where you kind of get it out. And I think that's sort of in line with my personality. I'm a risk taker, but I'm a calculated risk taker.
Right.
I'm comfortable with failure. You learn from it. You go forward, and not everybody has that personality. I think lawyers generally are very risk averse. It's just
so, yes. Yeah.
I think that's just generally how we are, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think fantastic lawyers have that personality trait, but I think you just have to be honest with yourself. And what I wanted to do, I just wanted to fire from the hips a little bit.
Yeah.
Take that chance. I had sort of a coming of age story actually, while I was at the firm. That sort of one thing a lot of lawyers and law students even suffer from, as brilliant as we are, we all, I think, suffer from imposter syndrome at some point in our career. Sometimes you're able to shake that off. Sometimes, it stays with you, right? And they shouldn't, because the lawyers are incredibly brilliant, collectively, and individually even. And they shouldn't have to worry. But for me, I had a very interesting interesting experience. So I was asked to draft a sort of a memorandum for the firm I was working at, the securities broker dealer, sort of indicating what to look out for in the national instrument in terms of identification and verification requirements. And now it sounds super boring. It was exciting at the time for me. And how to sort of navigate that and what our obligations as a firm would be, which was really cool. I did it. I did the research. I'm still, again, remember, this is like my first year of call. Very, very, very fresh into the game.
Right.
And I had submitted it to one of my seniors, and said he's going to circulate it around the compliance departments. You know, it's probably going to become policy. I was like, fantastic, that's really good. What really got me though, and this was kind of like an aha moment to me. So we had general counsel at one of the Bay Street firms, Bay Street law firms, and she, I think, has about 12 years of experience as a lawyer, based on, I think, at the time, what I kind of read up on her. And he had kind of sent an email, set up a call, and her conclusions were precisely the same as my conclusions regarding the national instrument. Now, to me, that's profound, and that, to me, that just kind of set it off. And to your point, this to answering your question, it said, you know, I may not be able to get it off the top of my head like she probably could, because she's got 12 or 13 years experience, but I got to the same conclusion.
You got to the same point, same conclusion, right?
Yeah. Got to the same answer. It took me a little bit longer, but I got there.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh, like I can do this.
Yeah. It's not so difficult. My take on that is, if someone else can do it, so can I. That's kind of the take I have. It might take me a little longer. I might have to figure out some things, but if someone else can do it, why can't I? It's interesting you talk about the imposter syndrome. So I read a stat, whether it's true or not, who knows, 70% of most entrepreneurs or business owners or founders experience imposter syndrome at some point in their career. And so it's far more prevalent than many would think.
It's not even because people lack the skills or ability, right?
No.
It's just, I think it's intrinsic self-doubt, which I think is
exactly. Yeah. It's sort of, and the question I always wonder is like, where does it come from? And like you just said, kind of hit the nail on the head. I think we're all ingrained, and I know this. I love my parents, and I'm sure you love your parents, and there's nothing to do with parents. No knock. I'm a parent myself, and my kids are probably good. I think as parents, I mean, I'll admit, as parents, we are often very overprotective or protective, however you want to word that. And I think that can be ingrained in sort of the child's head and psyche to be protective and to sort of like pull back and not to kind of put yourself out there. And when you are in a situation like you just explained that you were in, kind of making that decision to jump into it, and now you've jumped into it, and you're sort of like, can I do this? And then it's sort of, there's that uncertainty. Should I the guard against, kind of, safeguard against any possible, risks, or, just throw caution to the wind and just kind of go for it. Right. So I won't get into the whole legal aspect and the securities. I mean, I work with the National Instrument 45108 and 45110 and I've read through all the legalese and documents, and fucking tried to do it myself for the first bunch of years with a lot of that. So I know it can be a lot of heavy reading, heavy lifting. What got you though to kind of, so you mentioned there's a lot of legal aspects. So you said you were in kind of the in-house, and then you were looking at doing it, from a practice standpoint, a private practice. What was the appeal or the allure, and your mentor obviously saying getting into, and you kind of, I saw your face light up a couple times when you were talking about sort of like the real nitty gritty of the law, like, because to many of us, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a trained lawyer, I know very little about what a lawyer actually maybe is. Explain to the lay person what that really means, like in-house lawyer, private practice, getting into the law versus maybe just kind of working for a corporation as an in-house lawyer, and what that all entails, right? So that the lay person like me knows what it is that you're actually kind of getting into.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction you make. Just before I get to that though, I think one thing you said that kind of, it's important. I think one thing entrepreneurs need to really be comfortable with is being uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Right? Like you're really out of your comfort zone.
All
right?
the time.
every time, like from month to month, you don't know if you're going to make it. Like, and you have to be comfortable with that, right?
Sometimes day to day, right? It's
Yeah,
literally
absolutely.
hour to hour sometimes.
Absolutely, right? And you have to be okay with that, right? Like, is it easy? Absolutely not. Like, some
Yeah.
people can't live with that. Like, that's okay,
Yeah.
right? Like, everyone has to walk whatever path they feel comfortable with in life, right? And if stability is good for you, that's great. Like, if you're okay with having that, sort of the knife over your head 24/7, fantastic. I like to live on the edge sometimes, hence the reason why I do what I do.
Right.
And both are perfectly fine. But to answer your question, yeah. So I worked compliance with that company. I can't comment too much on what in-house specifically looks like because I've never actually been in that role.
Okay.
What I imagine is, and this is, and again, this is what senior lawyers have told me, right?
Right.
And I can only speculate as to what probably the distinction ought to be. But I think you're a lot more of a generalist when you're in-house counsel. So you do tend to wear many different hats.
Right.
Which is fine because I enjoy doing that, and I do that as a private practice practitioner. But there's certain elements. I guess you wouldn't have the opportunity to sort of interact with maybe at a deeper level in private practice, as a general counsel versus private practice. Because as a GC, you tend to you're in a management position where you're touching on certain areas of law, unless you're doing one specific thing for the company, and larger companies do have that, by the way. And say like an M&A branch, like that's all you'll do.
Right.
But if you say like a general counsel, right, where you're kind of advising on a little bit of everything, which is a lot of what I do as a private practitioner. But what you're effectively doing is you might have an employment matter come across your desk. You might have some litigation that you're managing. So my mentor had a colleague at the NCAA during the whole, I think it was the name, image, and likeness issues. So there's a lot of litigation around that, if I remember correctly. Is that what the matter was about? But anyway, she wasn't, like, the NCAA itself doesn't litigate, right? But the way they do is, like, her role would be to sort of grab all the litigation firms, that may be defending them and making sure to manage all of that, right? Okay. That's effectively, that's what they would do. It wouldn't be just.
So you're not actually the litigator, you're the almost like the project management of all these different things that are happening, right?
You work in conjunction with your firm's budget, right, to make sure that they get what they need. You understand what you can farm out, what you can't. And obviously, I wouldn't be able to speak more deeply than that, but that's my general understanding of how it is. I could be completely off base. In private practice, I think one of the allures of our private practice is working with a myriad of clients.
Right. I was going to say, with the in-house, you're like one client only. You're always you are the client almost, right? You're representative of that client, right? So
yeah, I mean, I'm so fortunate. I think as general counsel, you get to work with one company specifically, or maybe a group of companies if you're lucky. Right. But the thing is, like, anything can come across your desk, right? And I think one of the cool things is you get to decide whether you're going to take it on or not. Right. Within reason. And I think that's kind of the allure of private practice, to me at least, because there's a diversity in your clientele and the work that you get. Right. And particularly with startups, I mean, there's some really cool ideas out there. And our job, and certainly my job as counsel, is just to make sure that any sort of startup is in a position to succeed in the long run, and that could, and I think one of the important notes about this is that you're not just a lawyer. You're a trusted advisor,
right? Confidant kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, like, they'll start coming to you. Your clients will start coming to you for everything and anything, and particularly if it's legal related. Sometimes not even if it's really legal related, which is good because that's relationship building, which is a sort of common across all sort of entrepreneurial settings, right? Relationships are key to success, in my view, at least. But yeah, sometimes you'll have like a client going through divorce or something, and I'll give you a call, like, listen, I'm going through a divorce. I'm like, I'm sorry to hear that. I don't practice family law, but listen, I can direct you.
I can give you a reference to somebody, right? Or,
yeah. So that's basically, I think that's the biggest probably distinction between the two. And depending on the practice area, you get to, I guess, delve more into it. I wouldn't be able to say 100% without, having an informed opinion on in-house.
So let me go with that question. So you've obviously gone the route of private practice. You've obviously founded Regalia Law. How long, like, what give us sort of timeframes? How long have you been on your own, I guess, or not on your own, but like, how long has that been? What's What
Yeah,
kind
I've been
of time frame are you looking at?
about a year now. About
Okay,
a year.
cool,
Yeah,
awesome.
it's flown.
Time flies when you're having fun. That's what I always say. So,
Really, it really does.
yeah,
The
okay.
thing is, like, you have your long-term projections, and then you have your sort of month-to-month goals, as it
Okay.
were, right? You create your projections as you would, your 5-year plan or whatever. And that's just thinking broadly, right? Just thinking very high level, but then you go month to month and you think like, okay, how much do I need to do this month to sort of, cover costs and, as well as, and it's so difficult because you need to make sure, and this is obviously the philosophy my mentors have taught me and something I obviously practice. There, at the end of the day, you're paying for a service, right? And there has to be value to that service. You
Right.
can't just run up your bill, right? And I think being on our own, and being part of a smaller firm, you have I want to say the luxury of not charging as much as some larger firms that have a lot of
The
overhead.
overhead, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's good. So everyone kind of has a place in the ecosystem, which is really, really cool. But yeah, it's very important to sort of note those sort of distinctions and understand exactly, what kind of value are you getting. There's a colleague of mine, sort of, again, a mentor. I speak to a lot of senior lawyers, and he's incredibly important to learn from the people before me. Anyway, he's based out of LA. He's a sports lawyer, and he told me, he's like, a lawyer is the last thing you are to your clients. He's like, you're gonna be everything else. They want to buy a car, you kind of direct them through where they want to buy a car. They want to, start a business. You give them an idea of how to start that, and then the last thing they should look to you for, just almost counterintuitive, is legal advice. Is the actual transactional stuff.
Right.
Just be there for them, I think, is the biggest thing. And it really rings true, because I think you're able to develop a deeper relationship with your clients because of that. Because particularly, and clients are very intuitive, right? They'll know if you're trying to run up the bill or, trying to just sort of sell yourself or sell business.
It's interesting that you bring that up. So it's kind of, you mentioned at the beginning that, lawyers are, I'll use just the word smart, but, you've got that, intelligent. Lawyers obviously have got I would say a very critical way of thinking around, sort of parsing through maybe all the details and being able to really identify certain aspects of any given situation. So I think by having that critical mindset or critical thinking mindset, you're able to then potentially apply that to all walks of life, which makes you a good problem solver, right? Which you did not use the word smart, but I'm not a lawyer, so I just went with smart. But as you're laughing, but yeah. So I mean, you know what you mean. You're able to deduce things. So I think that's really cool that you're able to use, because I mean, it's similar to a doctor. I know not to kind of compare the two to too much of a to one another, but I think
I'm kidding.
What's that?
Said, how dare you compare it? No,
well, I was gonna say, I don't know who's gonna be more offended by it, but anyways, but here's the thing. I mean, I think, medical, obviously a doctor's, has a degree in one area usually of medicine, right? So they usually have your broad sort of whatever, and then you've got your specialization in whatever that is. But because they've gone through so much schooling, and they've learned so much, and they've probably experienced a lot throughout, and the ups and downs, and the late nights and all that in both regards. Law school is not easy, and neither is med school, right? Mm-hmm. I think the average person can go to them and probably expect more of a thought process on a broader range of topics than just the one specific topic that they might be, a professional at, right? So, and I think a lot of people discredit that in people, and you look at people with, maybe a PhD in a certain area. I mean, they've gone through a lot of thought process in a lot of different things. And just because they specialize on one area doesn't mean they can't think through, at a higher level than the average person, I would say, on every topic, right? And that's maybe to your point, right? So that kind of gives you a bit of that consultative ability to discuss all topics.
Possibly. I think what's important though is to understand your limits as well, right?
Well,
Like,
and the more you know you don't know, which is also true as well, right?
I think you sort of have to have that humility and self, that sort of introspection to understand that, look, I'm not an expert at everything, right? Like I can have an opinion on everything. Lawyers are very opinionated.
Yeah, lawyers are very opinionated.
We're very opinionated, or at least I don't want to say, I'm not going to generalize and say all lawyers. Like I'll be, if there was a lawyer, like a category of opinionated lawyers, I'd be in that category. Like,
okay,
I think it's just natural, just to sort of have opinions on things. But I think, have a cautious opinion, understand, try to be in the middle, try to understand both sides of whatever opinion you're trying to formulate. Because I mean, information is really key to formulating opinions. I don't think, maybe doctors aren't as opinionated, so they might.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's, I use the term, the more you know, the more you don't know. And I think that's a lot of people that have spent a lot of time studying certain aspects. And you talk about the imposter syndrome, I think that plays into it as well, is that you're not so quick to judge or jump to conclusions without all the facts or a large chunk of the facts.
I think that's
important. So that also helps when you're working with somebody to be like, hey, well, what about this aspect? Did you sort of think about that? And they're like, oh shit, I did it. And then you're like, well, and so you're almost not even giving them the answer. You're saying, here's maybe ways to go kind of explore to find the answer yourselves, which is, if you look at some of the old like the guru style, it's like, not going to teach you the answer. Think about this, I'm trying to be like, all the, whatever, but it's sort of like that, like sending them on the wax on, wax off journey. Right. But
I suppose doctors might be trained in that way as well. In assessing, someone's ailment, for example, they should collect as much information as possible before coming up with a conclusion on what could be the issue. Right.
Exactly.
But I will say one thing about doctors. They are in a very, very unique position to be entrepreneurial. And I say that is because they have access to an entire, I want to say, industry that most people don't have access to, right? Because the medical field is heavily, heavily regulated.
Right.
So by virtue of themselves being in that industry, they can perhaps, if certain doctors have that entrepreneurial mind, they can see the gaps and see where there is a need. And I know a few, some are clients, some are just colleagues and friends that have that entrepreneurial nature, and they have done incredibly well for themselves just because they were able to sort of disrupt the market, but also make advancements in areas in the medical field where they just saw an opportunity. Not everyone is sort of, sort of goes that way, but they are in a very unique position should they choose to.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, and obviously, again, we'll go back to the fact that because they can see different aspects more than just sort of like the blinders on, kind of like one way of thinking, they can explore different things. And then obviously, if you're exploring, pushing the boundary, kind of seeing where the, like you said, the gaps or the cracks or maybe the holes are, or the mistakes that are being made and ways to maybe rectify or address those, that's where that's where true entrepreneurship or innovation, I think, is more the comes from, right? You find the innovation, and now entrepreneurship is the exploration of innovation to commercialize the innovation, right? That's,
think about it. Justin, how much do you think someone's
I don't think
someone's
just kidding.
How much do you think someone's financial standing actually affects their desire to become entrepreneurial? Because I mean, if someone's already,
it's another driving force. It's, I mean, malaise, right? It's sort of, if somebody, I use this example. So there's a couple of things. I think there's definitely differing drivers in why someone becomes entrepreneurial.
right.
And definitely different times of their life will have different motivators or maybe detractors or things that are going to hold them back. So you could talk about, whether before having kids, before getting married, or after retirement, or, sort of made, right out of school, after a few, maybe after a failure, or after this or after that, or, a lot of times now with, I think, I've just even in the past 2 years having conversations with people have realized that, hey, the job they were in wasn't so secure, wasn't so, I'm going to be there forever. And they started, a lot of eyes were opened like, hey, maybe I should look at something, else, because who knows what's around the corner, right? A lot of people, I think the malaise of, you talked about lifer, being there, you graduate, you're there 20, 30, 40 years. I think that's gone. I mean, I know of one person in my entire, and I probably know of others, but one person that I know of that's relatively close to me that is been in the same position, same role their entire career. Outside of nurses, I think nurses and sort of like specialized practitioners is one thing, but like someone in a more of a generalized degree in the same position the entire time. Right.
Yeah, I think I think we're in the middle of the great resignation, as they call it.
That's what we're getting to, right? So
there's a lot of
making
lateral moves and
right.
trying to experiment and try different things. It's fascinating though to me. We're speaking from an entrepreneurial perspective, completely comfortable with being uncomfortable, doing our own thing, understanding all the risks that are involved and living with that, right? And being able to compartmentalize it, in my view.
Yeah.
Sort of decide while I focus on other things so I can get work done. But there was a fascinating quote I said not that I said, that I read. And someone said that a salary is sort of the prison that keeps you from achieving your dreams, right? And I think that's a loaded statement in my view, because in certain circumstances, for some people that is the case, right? But I don't think it almost comes off as prejudicial in the sense that there's nothing wrong with someone that wants stability, right?
And I was going to say to that point, there are probably being a real entrepreneur is probably not ideal for a large majority of the population. Yeah. Most people are extremely uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And they cannot survive or thrive. I mean, I'm in it myself, and I sometimes sit there going, what the fuck am I doing? What the fuck am I doing? Like, how do I rewind this and just like, yeah, and and you just the imposter syndrome all over.
The other part of that, Justin, is you don't know what someone's background could be, right?
Right.
At a very young age, some people could have been had to contribute financially, maybe 11 or 12 years old, just to support their homes, right? Just to support their houses. So when they get, say, a job at a large law firm where they're getting a very nice salary every 2 weeks, their paycheck coming, that is the golden standard for some people, right?
Oh yeah.
And why would
there's nothing wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Why would someone judge someone on that, right? And I feel that sort of I use the term prejudicial for lack of a better word, but almost judgmental tone to like, okay, if you're not like this, then you're that, and that's not really great because you should always be doing this.
No,
right?
No, I think from my perspective, and this again, I'll use my perspective. I would say entrepreneurship is for very few, and I would say, and I've had many conversations with entrepreneurs on this show. We're at 120 episodes or so, and over the past 2.5 years, it's not for, I would say what is
faint of heart.
Faint of heart is exactly right, or faint of anything, right? Like literally, like we talked about, like the ups and downs, the unknowns, the uncertainty, the uncomfortableness. It is not for the many. What I will say on the flip side, to your point, and I've noticed this, and I do say this to some friends that are in sort of what I would consider a rut, right? And where they get comfortable in something. So I'll throw this out, a buddy of mine, university buddy, great coach, right? Very much into sports, is also a teacher, and early on, was very active in the sort of the athletics of teaching, and also did, coach outside of teaching. But I feel as time has worn on, the comfort of, being the teacher, he no longer coaches the kids at school, right? So I think there's this shift. You see early teachers are all the ones coaching, and the ones that have been there, 15, 20 years are no longer, they're just showing up. And I'm not saying they're bad teachers. I'm just saying they put in less effort, right? And as a result, also the outside coaching, where he had a dream of being, an NCAA coach, or, sort of a much higher level coach, but the comfort of one aspect maybe is influencing the malaise. I'll use the word malaise. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the complacency or the, whatever I call it the rut, whatever you want to call it, the lack of motivation to go out and try that, to step into something that early on was the dream. And still, I mean, I was talking to him not too long ago, and that's still the dream. I mean, it's still a dream is to be even more than that, maybe an athletic director or things of that nature. But I feel like, sometimes you get in a rut, you get imposter syndrome. I say things like, hey, why don't you, like, you're a teacher, go be at some college in Ontario and go be the AD there. I'm sure you could get an AD job at a college in Ontario, and then go from there to, NCAA, and then, whatever that is. Like, there's definitely routes, but I think if you're comfortable in what you're doing, and whether it's financially, relationship, whatever, it definitely leads to a bit of a complacency where you just kind of skate through life. And to your point about financial, like the financial drive towards entrepreneurship or not, I think it can have a positive, but I think it can also be very negative on both sides. I think it can definitely be a driving force. If you're looking, you talked about somebody coming out of potentially nothing to try to, make a success. That could be a motivator, but I think also if the lack of funds can also be very disheartening, and can make it very difficult, more difficult than it maybe needs to be.
I think finances is a very dangerous motivator.
Right.
If you're going into entrepreneurship, I think it should be a factor in some, because I mean, at the end of the day, you have to pay your bills, you have to put food on the table, things of that nature. But it's a dangerous motivator in the sense that if that's your end goal, once you achieve that, what do you do? Right?
What are you actually?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and this is my view. I think if you enjoy building things, you're gonna do it regardless how much money. You're just gonna jump onto another project, and perhaps this would be a good segue into our crypto. There's maybe a crypto conversation.
Speaking of, there you go. Let's technology and crypto and backers. I mean,
we can.
You want to talk about that?
Let's segue into that.
So,
as an example, so the reason I brought it up with doctors is because after you spent like maybe 15 years in school and you're doing surgeries, working 3 times a week, and you're kind of relaxing, right? Like you've got your Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, you're there, right? Like you're making, maybe $500,000 in some cases, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what do you like? If you want more, if you decide to build, I think if it's in you, you're going to do it. But for some people that might make them complacent, right? It completely depends individual to individual. My view, obviously, right? I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, in that regard, to doctors, and I think doctors are very rare. And you hit on like basically a surgeon, right? I mean, that's a very specialized.
Very high up
you're making, like you said, $500,000, a few $100,000 minimum. They're not working, just for the record, anyone out there, they're not working a lazy 3 days a week. They're working like 24 hours straight. No sleep. It's fucking hard. I have a buddy as well.
But you made it, right?
And you made it, and it's hard hours, but you probably have the financial money to not have to worry financially about what's going to happen, which that can be a motivating factor. And whether emotionally or psychologically or from a family standpoint or any other aspect of your life.
You've got those.
You'll have to figure those out, but.
But you've got long surgeries can take like up to 48 hours in some cases, right? Incredible. But my point is they've set the goal, right? The goal was to get there.
And they've retained the goal almost.
They've attained the goal,
so what's the next step? Maybe that's the question.
Exactly. And that's the question. And is there a next step?
Do they need a next step, right?
And I think that's the discussion. But I think if you're naturally inclined to want to build things, there are many medical students, and I've seen I represented one actually a few years ago. She was remarkably accomplished. I mean, she was already writing books and stuff when she was in med school, right? And starting companies and stuff. I was like, it's no wonder it's so competitive to get in. Like it was, I read some of the stuff she did. I was like, she's accomplished more in this than I might do in a lifetime. Like,
right. She's like 22 and she's already done more than exactly.
It was
that Tupac was 25 when he died. Like,
there you
and
go,
there's an
yeah.
example, right? Dude was in
Exactly.
movies, wrote like 3 or 4 like
Kobe Bryant.
albums, right?
Kobe
Kobe-
Bryant did more than most people could do in 10 lifetimes. Like,
yeah, exactly.
remarkable, like super
Yeah.
high achiever, right?
Yeah.
And right after his career, he went right back to building something. He's like, I'm gonna, focus into my creative, and I'm gonna create something more. Guy wins, what was it, an Oscar? He won an
Yeah.
Oscar.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I can look it up. Is it an Oscar or an Emmy? Not an Emmy.
It was an Oscar. I think it was for a short film. Or no, sorry, was it a short film?
Yeah.
Oscar for
Yeah.
short film.
He won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film.
There you go.
Dear Basketball. Yeah, exactly. So
How long did DiCaprio have to wait to get his?
did he not just win one? I haven't watched him. I thought he won it last year or something. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It was like he was around since like Titanic
He
days.
did it
Right?
a few years after his career. It's phenomenal.
What's eating Gilbert grapes or whatever?
Yeah.
Who's eating Gilbert grapes? I don't know, whatever it's called.
No,
Something like that. That's like when he was a kid, but yeah.
And Kobe, I think, had it in him. I think he had that drive.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I got my 5 championships. I wanted like 8, but it's okay. I'm going on to the next thing in my career, and I'm okay with that, right?
Yeah.
He had it in him. So some people just have it in them. To that point, though, and I was going to make a segue into the crypto stuff because I wanted to tell you about. There's a gentleman. I think his name was Justin Lim. He's the founder of Twitch.
Yeah.
And he sold Twitch. He said, no, I'm not really doing the entrepreneurial thing. He was doing VC, and then he ended up starting another thing, right? So I think he's got that bug. He started something called
Justin Kahn.
No, Justin Kahn is his convention, I think. Oh yeah, Justin Kahn. Yeah, Justin Kahn is his name, right? Yeah, you're right. Justin Kahn is his name, and he started a new thing.
It was originally called Justin TV, and ironically, I mean, being named Justin, I thought it was an amazing name. But yeah, so I've watched him a little bit over the past few years. But he's doing all kinds of social media stuff. I don't know what he's up to. Do you know?
He
what
actually
he's up
just
to
started a
these days?
new NFT marketplace, I believe it was called.
Okay.
And I think what is it called? I'm just going to look it up really quickly right now. I know it's Fractal Marketplace. Is that what it was?
I'm looking at it right now. The drop.
There was a drop.
Atrium.
Can't remember what the website. Anyway, he started this new website that's kind of like no, it's the Atrium. What was it? Oh dear God, dear God.
Oh, so he's basically releasing his YouTube clips as tokens on OpenSea.
Yeah, he went on. He started his own website as well. And I'm just gonna pull up. I'm gonna see one of the NFTs that he's in the NFT place now. He's in the NFT space. I'm just gonna go check one of these whitelists. Yeah, so he started this thing called Fractal, right? Fractal.is is the marketplace name. And it's effectively, he's kind of linking NFTs to video games, right? And we can have a discussion about NFTs and backers, and I think this will be but the point was that he's an entrepreneur true and true, right? He did the Justin.tv into Twitch, sold that, doesn't have to work another day in his life if he wanted to, but just likes building stuff, went on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk to me about backers. I think backers is really, really cool based on the stuff I read.
Yeah, so I mean, interesting. We'll flip right into that. So yeah, I mean, for me, I started a couple businesses. One of them was the 3HL, 3-on-3 Hockey League, and I was looking for a way to fund the team. So talking about finance and private equity and all of that fun stuff, and the investment management world. I kind of came from it a little bit, maybe 10, 12 years ago. I worked for AGF, I worked for a venture capital firm, kind of went and did my MBA and stuff. So have a bit of a finance background, and was looking to fund the teams in the league, and came across the concept of equity crowdfunding, and basically saw how you could have community owned teams through equity crowdfunding, where now you've got retail investors, sort of everyday non-accredited investors investing in a private business, right? And all the, perils that come along with private equity investments, the liquidity issues, the fact that it can go to zero, very quickly. Obviously, it's early stage startups, and the whole VC space of how difficult it is for entrepreneurs, especially, I'm not a person of color, so it doesn't, but I think everyone is affected, but even more so people of color, people of, all different walks of life. So there's definitely a gap there. So I, saw that. I was trying to figure it out on my own. Equity crowdfunding seemed like a pretty cool opportunity. Looked around, there was, the regulations were coming in Canada and the US, in Canada 2016, the, NI 108, 45108, the crowdfunding exemption came out. They had a couple others. The startup is now out, the OM exemption, there's a couple others, right? So all these exemptions in the US, they got Reg A, Reg A plus, Reg CF, so Reg crowdfunding, Reg D, all these kind of retail investor regulations that allow for private companies to go raise, restricted amounts of money from retail investors. And so saw that, and then I was, getting into blockchain and crypto sort of in 2017, 2018, saw that, this whole sort of security tokenization of assets could be very easily married, in my opinion, with existing regulations, where it seemed like outlandish to people. I was like, the rules exist, the technology's here. How are we not, like, do people not see? Just connect the two, right? Like, connect the dots, right? It seemed to me like a no-brainer, but obviously the adoption of crypto at the time very low. I mean, it's set to skyrocket this, the next probably 12 months. They expect almost a 10x in adoption rate. You see the crypto.coms and all that. But for the past 4 years, we've been building out a tokenizer that essentially, initially based on the Ethereum platform, we're now branching out. We're building on a couple other layer 1 blockchains. We've looked at other options, layer 2, come cross interoperable blockchains and whatnot. But I'm not going to name any names just for competitive analysis. But we are working with 2 of the, I would say, top 3 or 4 layer 1 blockchains. One on the payment processing, and the other one on the just transactional processing. What's that?
I was gonna ask you with regard to I know you put it on the Ethereum blockchain, but the Ethereum, as we know, has very high gas fees.
So we're migrating away from Ethereum. So over the past year and a half, we've been.
You don't think, obviously you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, if you don't want to disclose it.
I mean, we work with so in the process, Solana was definitely AVAX, Avalanche, Algorand, XRP, so XRP Ledger, HBAR. So there's a number.
You don't think there's any appeal in Ethereum 2.0?
100%. We were waiting forever. We waited forever. We've been waiting for 18 months for Ethereum 2.0.
I heard they're releasing it this year. I mean,
well, it's been 6 months away for 18 months. So it's sort of like, it's kind of like, you kind of, as a business,
right.
we actually built out our initial tokenizer, and we're back in the summer, like almost 9 months ago, ready to release the tokens, and started to look at some of the fees and stuff. And it, what was usually cents, maybe a few dollars, single digit dollars, was now looking at like $70, $80, $90, right, per transaction.
Yeah.
When you look at like $100 investment, and you're shifting the tokens that represent that investment, that's going to cost you $90 just to send the tokens as that one transaction. It does not make sense. I don't know what, but yeah, any business school you go to, that doesn't make sense, right?
That doesn't fly.
It doesn't add up. So we had to sort of make initially, in the summer, last sort of spring, summer, it's probably creeping up there like $30, $40. We're like, okay, can we kind of eat that one-time cost, and maybe just to kind of get proof of concept and stuff out? And it didn't make sense. So anyways, we're transitioning, we're working with a couple different layer 1 protocols. They're more receptive than sort of Ethereum's been sort of this, almost there's no one really to talk to, or it's an interesting entity. So we've, had a lot of communication with them. We're going to be working and building on their platforms. We looked at kind of the, going out the layer 0 with something like a, Cosmos, and building our own, our own blockchain, which may happen down the road, kind of different things. So the idea though with backers is literally we're tokenizing assets. So tokenizing the security through the form of a security token that represents 1-to-1 the share or the stock in that company. It's private equity. So we use the term private as the new public. So we're in the process. We were working with an EMD We're in the process of becoming or will become a funding portal, and then EMD, and then eventually a marketplace, so regulated marketplace here in Canada. And yeah, so the idea is kind of access to capital for early stage startups. We sort of talked about, how difficult that can be. Obviously, liquidity for investors. I think the whole transparency, immutability, security of the blockchain makes it that much better for regulators. And all around, just kind of the tokenization aspect. I do wonder at times, am I proliferating the digital ID and the collapse of humanity at times, and the ascension into the singularity? But I mean, it is what it is at this point. All you conspiracy theorists, think about that for a second.
The singularity seems inevitable at this point.
It is, right? I mean, so I don't even want to get into my thoughts, but hey, I want to, I think we're all kind of heading towards that. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if done properly. I think it's a bad thing if with corruption, and I think some of the things that are in the news recently, I think overreach and stuff where I think governments are going to have to really start to think about how they deal with this, so as to not basically enslave humanity through tokenization. But and that's probably a whole ethics conversation around there.
Did you see the executive order by Biden?
Yeah, I mean, how they're getting into the regulation around crypto. I mean,
I think it was inevitable. To be honest with you, I think there
100%.
has to be the regulation around it. A lot of it were just kind of principles on where they think they're going to go with it.
Yeah,
understandably so. And one of the common themes, I think, was the Americans being at the central of the financial world, right? They very much are about centralizing it and sort of giving more power to banks. But I
which
think
is kind of counter to crypto. I'm not going to lie.
And I was going to say, one of the biggest allures to crypto is actually the deregulated nature,
the decentralization of it, right?
But yeah, absolutely. And part of the issue to that is, and the reality I think we all sort of have to realize, is that the fact that there are illicit activities happening using crypto as a currency, although I think it behaves more like an asset than it does a currency, if we're being quite frank. But those do exist, right? Say on the and they choose say things such as Bitcoin or other coins.
So I mean so you look at the Silk Road as sort of maybe what you're alluding to early days.
And so it's understandable that they want to regulate that element, and they actually made specific mention of sort of like AML,
anti-money laundering, all the KYC aspects of crypto.
It just depends
platforms.
how far the reach is going to be, right? And it seems to me, in sort of, I guess, introductory reading to it, very base level, without being super involved in deep into the space, right? Because you're either like completely 100% in it, or you don't believe in it at all. I'm sort of like in the middle. But yeah, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get a piece of the pie. I think that's they're trying to
you touched on a whole bunch of things. So I think one of the things that I early on, when I identified sort of the technology and the regulations, right? Obviously, regulations is the key word there. That in Ontario specifically, or Canada-wide, and in the US, there were regulations that were in place that would allow for the tokenization of securities. So every word I just said is all very regulated. When you look at cryptocurrency in that term that they use, I think it's a bit of a misnomer. I think
absolutely
90+%, maybe as many as 99% of cryptocurrencies are actually securities, or are very, very close to being a security, or as you said, representative of some sort of asset. And so unlike maybe a Bitcoin where it's fully decentralized, maybe there was no funds raised per se to fund the formation of the software. Ripple is kind of battling that a little bit. You've got Ethereum arguably raised money, 13 million, I believe, as a Canadian, illegally, right? He went out and sold security. So whether that, I believe there's going to be, and this is only my opinion only, no financial advice, I don't know what you have to say. You're the lawyer, tell me what I have to say. This is just my opinion. I always believed that the ICO craze that happened in sort of 2016, 17, 18 in initial coin offerings for those are literally tokenized assets, right? So they were using ERC20, so Ethereum tokens, to tokenize. So all those ICOs were basically selling ERC20 tokens that represented whatever they said it represented, right? And some of it was vaporware, some were rug pulls, some of it came and went, and it was a big, whatever, scam. What I envisioned was that if you could marry that technology, so what we're creating are essentially crypto stocks, in my opinion, and they are regulated crypto stocks. I believe that the regulations are going to come in hot, hard, heavy, and very much overboard. And then over the next, so that'll happen. And I predicted this 3 years ago that would happen, that in 3 to 5 years, everything will be tokenized. They'll be heavily regulated. But I believe just like some regulated industries are now, the regulations will ease. And I think things will happen 5 years from now, 8 years from now, where they'll start to see that, okay, I can, they'll start to be more comfortable with the uncomfortable, which won't be so uncomfortable because there'll be more awareness of it. More people will understand it, and they'll start to ease off some of the regulations. Some of the overreach, some of those things won't be in play. So I think there's
a very reasonable assessment.
Yeah.
I think that's a very reasonable assessment of where we're going. I don't think it's going to explode immediately, right? It's sort of,
so the projection is adoption to a million.
Come in fast and hard, like you mentioned. And they will, I think they will ease. But I think the biggest issue.
Did we lose you? Well, I think you're still there. I'm still there. Oh, right when we were in a good conversation. Can you hear me? Yeah, we're good. We'll keep going. Keep going. Yeah. So you don't think it'll come?
You're talking about the adoption?
Yeah. I was saying that projected adoption is up to 1 billion users of crypto by the end of 2022, up from about 100 million end of 2021, 150 million. So that's like almost a 10x, in a year.
Yeah, and I think my point is more around the regulatory element, right? I think you're right. I think there's always going to be sort of over regulation before there's under regulation, right?
Right.
Right. There's very little regulation right now, but it's building very quickly. The momentum is there. Even the White House has even touched on they're going to meet with Department of Energy or Natural Resources, something of that nature. Whoever governs the
energy consumption for like Bitcoin mining. Yeah.
Probably because of the gas fees and effect on environment, and I think that's the right move, right? They have to somehow administer that. I'm not by any means an advocate of over-regulation.
I think it's definitely plays its part. I mean, we're building a regulated platform, right? So for me, I mean, that's very much the space we're in. But I also see the advantage of sort of unregulated or less regulated. Where you think, you talk about, in the US alone, you've got the SEC and you've got, this commodities, whatever, CFTC or whatever it is, right? And so one, you look at it as a commodity, the other one, you look at it as, or a currency, the other one is looked at as a security, right? And so whether it meets the Howey test or whatever, this new Ripple, it'll probably be called the Ripple test or XRP test, whatever that, whatever the standards they create to make the sort of the hurdle or the barrier over or under as to whether it's a security or not. I think a lot of those things are necessary to be defined. I think one of the things that a lot of people has made a lot of people unsure about crypto is the fact that there is so much uncertainty as to what it is. Like everyone's afraid, will Bitcoin be shut down, right? Like no one thinks like the dollar is being shut down, right? Like, but there's a fear in the marketplace by many that Bitcoin will go to zero kind of thing, or be shut down or be banned, or will it go to the moon, if you will, on the other end, and full adoption, right? And it's sort of got that spectrum of people. And yes, governments 100% unfortunately want to regulate their populace, right? And regulate what they do to maintain control. And so there's certain aspects around that. But I think as a society, we need to look at things like, and whether you agree or disagree with Trudeau, the fact that he was able to label a contributor to a donator to a cause that they believed in, labeled them as and you talked about the AML, as a designated person, right? Meaning their banks were frozen and they're essentially labeled in line with a terrorist, right? Is pretty fucking,
It's terrifying.
it's pretty
It's terrifying.
pretty crazy that it can go to that extreme, right? And that not only touched on Canadian banks, which obviously have to follow, FinTrack, and we're a FinTrack registered MSB, so we would have to adhere to those same regulations with backers, but to not only the banks for the cash aspect or the fiat aspect, but then they were able to like tap into these, so-called crypto platforms and tap into their accounts and freeze their accounts or freeze their assets. So it's kind of crazy that the governments, so I think a lot of what's happening is you're starting to see the boundaries being pushed on all avenues and everyone trying to figure out like where do we sit in this place? And NFTs, you talk about, Justin Kahn, is a place where it's very much the wild, wild west, unregulated, but I think you're going to start to see the AML stuff coming into that, the KYC, because it's money laundering at half the time. Right?
You have to, yeah.
Some of the shit that happens, right? So
I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said, what your perceived uses of these cryptos are, right? Some people are calling the some people are calling the order by Biden's administration the death of crypto. I think that's a little bit cryptic. It doesn't make sense to me. I think because it's only a general discussion. But what I'm suggesting is that if you kind of have the position that there was going to be some sort of regulations coming in at some point, right? And your position, you weren't all about the decentralized element, and you sort of concede that there's a point, but there are larger uses. There are
other uses than what we're doing. 100%.
Larger uses for that, particularly with the blockchain technology, which I think has a phenomenal amount of use to it that hasn't yet been harnessed, and it will be. And I think, particularly in the startup space, there's going to be some really cool stuff coming forward. I think one of them is maybe, and I've heard, is the logistics space, which is very, very tricky right now. It was already close to breaking pre-pandemic. It ended up breaking in the pandemic. It's only getting worse. And I've heard that blockchain technology could be used to sort of alleviate that. I don't know how. These are only sort of murmurs. But if that's possible, I think it's a very lucrative opportunity, and you're solving a very legitimate problem. On the point of the what's happening in Canada, that's an entire discussion I can be more than happy to have on. But it's outside the
round two.
This
round
podcast.
two. Let's do round two if we want.
But yeah, so on the point of NFTs though, huge. We saw like towards the end, right? And I think, the executive order, I think with the fact that the crypto market is currently bearish sort of added to the sort of panic a little bit.
Right.
I don't think like markets go up, markets go down. It's just the nature of the markets. But to the point about NFTs, it became huge. End of 2021, beginning of 2022, like everyone's buying it. And again, I think it's about perspective, right? I personally don't believe that NFTs in themselves intrinsically, all you do is look at the art, right? Like you can, and like if you enjoy the art and that's the reason you're purchasing it, fantastic, right? Because I love art personally. I think it's really cool. I like, in real life and the virtual world, I think it's really cool if you have these sort of things that you sort of admire and you want to own. But I think what is so key to NFTs is the sort of the community, and what an NFT can give you really valuable ones. It gives you access to that community, right? I'll give you.
It's sort of like membership. It's like a membership. It's like that Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? It's not about the image of the Bored Ape. They're cool and it's appealing and it's sort of like, hey, I can put it as my profile pic or whatever. But no one's sitting there going, wow, this is an amazing Bored Ape. It's more that the access to the community, assuming, and I don't know all of the answers to this, but maybe they get access to a yacht club or to community events or these, sort of.
It's very much the case. People are getting into parties based on their membership and their ownership of these NFTs.
Right, exactly.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. So it's more to do almost like, and this is where the whole concept of backers is, and we're kind of exploring the DAO concept, right? The decentralized
DAOs are very cool
organization, right? Where I look at it, backers as expanding. Initially it was sort of straight up, we're selling the equity, it's tokenized, it's on the blockchain, it's in your wallet, there's some liquidity. Now we're starting to explore with some of our clients this concept of the DAO, where now you've got the actual, and you know, with the 3HL, we're broadening it into fan owned and operated, right? So it's now where the token holders, just like an NFT, a security token, they're literally built on the exact same technology. One's using slightly different protocol, the other one's using slightly different protocols, but you know, the smart contract's a little different, but the premise, the underlying, you know, technology is the exact same. And what you can do now is you can now create like the voting mechanism around, you know, every aspect of being a part of this business, an owner, a backer, where you can now dictate, you know, in the case of the 3HL, who are the players on the team, who, you know, what are we going to pay them salary wise, who's going to play that game day, who the coach is going to be, who the GM is. Like,
how's the ownership structure work? Is it share based? I'm a little bit ignorant.
It's shares, yeah, it's shares. So it's purely
so
shares
if there's a 51% owner, would they still have most of the say?
So so you've brought an interesting point. So there's your corporate, you know, actual legal voting rights.
Right.
That would remain with likely a few people, and we're debating where that goes. We're talking more on the day-to-day activity of the operational aspects of the business, right? Sure. So giving more of a organizational structure instead of a top-down, you know, CEO says this, you know, senior directors say this, managers say this, employees do. It's more like all shareholders now can say, what are the employees going to do? Right. So it's almost like that flat organization. And there's a lot of aspects of it being played out. We're not experts or don't know all the answers to it. But we're definitely starting to build out the thought process around these DAOs and building out. So I'm working on about 4 projects right now, 4 DAOs to build out DAOs for these organizations in varying fields, right? From, you know, sort of social enterprise all the way through to, you mentioned on the sporting side, also into real estate, you know, development, right? Where now it's almost like a co-op type of program, but it's not co-op. So you get, you know, a lot more engagement of the participants, the stakeholders.
So from a business side of things, how do you go about developing DAOs?
Well, it's technology based, right? So it's right. Building out the smart contracts on the blockchain, right? That basically facilitate all of the activities of the DAO, right? So, you know, input, output, right? I mean, blockchain itself is very much just a software tool, right? That, you know, it's sort of like database meets execution software. It's like API, you know, it's an API meets a database kind of all in together now, right? It's like in one simple line of code. It's like this input, that output, this input, that output, right? And then over here you got that output means this input means that. It's like a series of, you know, this means that, right? Like an if-then kind of series of if-then sort of statements.
And then you kind of introduce that based on whose position, like who would dictate those kind of metrics, like if this happens then this happens.
So you could have a couple different inputs. You could have like I said, stakeholder input. So literally a vote. Do you want this or you don't want that? Yes or no? And then you tabulate the vote, and you know the outcome determines the outcome.
In the way regular corporations work.
Right. Or you could then have, but more on an ongoing basis, right? So for a sporting
team, you still have executives such as CEOs, CFOs.
You may or may not. I mean, in a DAO, you might have none of them. Every decision could be made at the stakeholder level, right? And so now here's the thing: other stakeholders present ideas or alternatives, so everyone becomes the generator of ideas, and everyone becomes the decider of the ideas, right? In that case, right? That's sort of a simplified way of putting it. The other aspect is you can, you know, from a financial aspect, you could have money coming in and now you're determining how it's spent. You could have money going out and you're determining where it's going, right? And then you could have a smart contract that literally is tied into, okay, if this money comes in here for this, or this date is met, or this you know threshold is met, it automatically says, okay, do this. and then something else sends it. Okay, we sent this, notice to the bank sends an EFT, for example. Like that's kind of, in a payout perspective, right? We're building out like a payout or payments structure using smart contracts, right? So everything is basically if then. There is no, and you can use that, you can do that using traditional software, except now it's all very transparent. You can't cook the books, you can't, it's immutable, it's there. It is what it is. So you obviously have to go through and audit all of the, your whole smart contract and your whole workflow to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do, because if it's not, and you start funneling shit through it, it's gonna, you could face, unforeseen consequences if
And
that's
who
the
would be
case.
accountable if that happens?
Well, the corporation, right? So I mean, now you start
It would be a corporation, but
right.
yeah, you could have the corporation as a whole accountable. I mean, sometimes you can point to individuals within the corporation.
Well, and then you start getting into like, building out. So that's where you have auditing of the, the smart contracts, auditing of the whole process, right? So
and whose responsibility? Because somebody has to start all this, right? So whose
There has
responsibility is it ultimately fall to?
well, in the case of backers, I guess it falls to me. In the case of some of these organizations that we're helping to build out, it would ideally or likely fall to the founder. But the ideal long-term though is if this can become a, and people start to really wrap their heads around that it's the whole are responsible for the whole. And so if they, maybe the whole are the ones auditing, or they determine an audit team, and then the audit team is a stakeholder, and then there can be nonstop kind of back and forth where it's, and you talk about the singularity, right? That's bringing in the singularity, right? Like when I joke about it, I'm not joking about it. Like it's kind of the early days of the hive mind kind of working towards a common goal and objective. Now that can also backfire, right? You talk about the mob rule, and maybe that's not ideal. So there's always like safe gaps or stop gaps, if you will.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating to me because the way general corporations work, right? You have your directors who are the mind and operations of the organization, right? They have a certain fiduciary duty to the organization. And even among shareholders, you have shareholder agreements that either limit or protect or enable certain rights. Right? Minority shareholders have certain protections in a well-drafted shareholder agreement, or maybe they don't, depending on how you want to operate your corporation. I'm just trying to sort of translate that into what a DAO is and how that kind of sort of switches over, it's a fascinating exercise in my mind. I think I understand the technical aspect of it in terms of how it operates. I'm just sort of trying to marry it with the legal, and there might be stuff out there on there. I think Wyoming, was it that
Wyoming
approved DAOs or it's been tabled as legislation or something like that, where they want to approve it within the state. They much like Delaware have more open sort of corporate environments. But I can't remember if it was Wyoming or some other state. But I think the DAOs have been at the forefront of certain discussions in the legal world. And I'm interested to see how things kind of play out in Canada with that regard.
Yeah, so it says Wyoming has become the first U.S. state to legally recognize DAOs and grant them the same rights as limited, so LLCs, in a law that went in effect July 1st, so 6 months ago, July 1st, 2021.
Yeah.
There you go. So I mean, there you go. So a DAO is an LLC, right? So who's in?
I like to see the optics of how they're kind of doing that. I'll probably read into it just academically a little bit later. But I think that's fascinating. And
that's the decentralization, right? You talk about the regulated and then the decentralized side, and then we talked about DeFi and other utilizations or use cases of blockchain. I mean, you talked about what was the use case? You said supply chain, right? So logistics. Also, you look at like similarly, you look at video or content. So CDNs, right? It's not dissimilar, right? And the distribution of content and video sharing and live streaming. I mean, we're looking at building out a platform called Water. Literally, it'll be like a free internet, free live streaming, free communication, mesh network type technology built on blockchain using sort of mesh network, mesh web technologies that will allow for you to literally do anything you want from a device for free. So kind of provide free internet, free access, free communication, right? But it's distributed. So that's the unregulated, decentralized kind of everyone's a node in the broader network, right?
That's very cool. Awesome stuff, man. You're working on
cool. Fun, always fun times. I mean, it's I think I'm the builder. I'm definitely the builder. Yeah.
That's what you got to do, right? You got to love what you got, love what you do.
Yeah, I love it for sure. So anyways, Essa, I really appreciate you joining me. Is there any final words? I used to end the show with I think a bit of an ending. I can't even remember what it is, but any final words, any final thoughts? It was something along the lines of, would you I can't even remember, but yeah, it was sort of like a dilemma. Would you choose this or would you choose that? And it was kind of like people would sort of give an answer, but I'll end it with this, where I really appreciate you joining me. I know we've taken a long time. It's been a pretty awesome conversation. We should do round 2. I think I'd love to hear your, maybe do a little, maybe delve into it a little bit and then come back with your legal hat on and give us maybe your thoughts on a DAO. That'd be kind of interesting to see what, where we go with that, or sort of where, if you delve into it a little bit, but
yeah, I think it'll be a fascinating discussion. I mean, people are always asking, how do you get into crypto, how do you get into this and the other, how to become a crypto expert, but what I think you need to do is, particularly in the legal field, understand corporate commercial law, right? Because it's fundamentally what it is. It's corporate. That's how it's going to be used, right? In my view.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. I'm still very much a rookie. I mean, I think everyone's a rookie to some extent because this is very.
Like I said to you on the phone the other day, I think if you've been in crypto longer than like 3 or 4 years, you're literally like a vet. So like a year is you're middle-aged crypto. Right? Yeah, a year and a half, right? So it's all good.
It is very cool. But thank you so much for having me, Justin. Let's absolutely do this again. This was a lot of fun.
Cool. Where can people find you? Obviously, your law firm, right? Do you have any social media or where?
You can find us on our website, regalialaw.com. Best way to find us. You can always call us at our number and reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help.
Are you on social media at all? LinkedIn, I guess. Jump on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn as well. So you can hit us up there. We're going to setting up our Insta and our Twitter right now.
TikTok?
TikTok? No, not TikTok, not yet.
I'm telling you, I will say this. I'll end it with this, and everyone that's watching, TikTok right now, and I'm sure you've heard this for the past year or whatever.
Yeah.
100%, I would say 1000% is the best way to reach an audience. Period. Hands down. Like the algorithm and the way they use the FYP or the For You page, you can have 0 followers and get hundreds of views on a video or content, right? And if that content is appealing, you can get thousands of views. And if it's really appealing, tens of thousands of views. And if it's extremely appealing, hundreds of thousands, millions of views. And then your following goes up, and now every video you put out has, gets a few hundred views.
Yeah.
Whereas Facebook, you can't do that. I mean, it just, or Instagram or Twitter or, I don't know any of the other, other non-mainstream, but like, yeah, it's by far now people question the target audience. The target audience probably skews millennial to Gen X. I would say Gen Z, it's no longer teenagers. I mean, there's still that area of it, but I'd say it's more millennial into kind of your Gen X, which I'm kind of in between the both of them. I'm sort of a zennial, but I'm an older millennial, I think. But, you're probably like younger millennial.
Yeah, I think I'm younger millennial.
Or even into the whatever the Z, right? Are you kind of like? Are you kind of?
I think I'm younger millennial. I think I looked this up because like my dad kept telling me like you're such a you millennial kids. I was like, am I millennial? Like,
well, yeah, I think we're kind of on the either ends of millennial there.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Cool. Anyways, Essa, really appreciate it. We should talk more off air because I'd love to, and I mentioned some stuff, but yeah, we should definitely talk. Cool things are happening with backers, and I love what you're doing. So I'd love to maybe bring you in and involve your practice in what we're doing with backers. So in some of our
thanks for having me, Justin. Much appreciated.
Cool. Everyone else, this is One Take powered by Backers. Justin Fox, Essa, Abdool, Karim. Essa, cheers. Thanks. Talk soon. And we are going to, can I figure even out how to stop the recording? Hey there. Welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.